Someday, I'm gonna make great machines that fly. And me and my friends are gonna go flying together into the forever and beautiful sky. Lila, and Teefs, and Flora, and me. Rocket.
It really is good to have friends.
Yeah.
The Guardians of the Galaxy was a bit of a breakout success for the Marvel Universe. That's a bit of an understatement, but for those unaware, they were relatively unknown before the first movie came out. They were Marvel's first foray into the space world, not counting Thor. But one thing that always struck me about these ragtag group of eventual heroes is that they had a certain charm to them. It wasn't until the release of Guardians Volume 3 that it clicked, and it made the previous two films and even their appearances in Avengers Infinity War and Endgame even more impactful. By the way, this isn't my review of Guardians 3. If you want my review, it was good. There, that's it. But it does factor into my point here, so I will be discussing it. Spoilers if you haven't seen it. While we've had Marvel characters that we've known for a much longer time over the course of more films, there was a satisfying closure of a chapter in this new entry. James Gunn has a particular way of writing endings, and it's honestly something I've been wanting more of. Something that's so viscerally human. Something with a lot of heart. Coming into the first Guardians film, I am so sorry. I just watched IGN's interview with the Guardians cast, and they talked about Chris Pratt's little prop body double. They ruined a certain word for me. Just go watch the clip.
Dude, what in Scream?
Anyway, I was mostly blind going into the first Guardians of the Galaxy film. I didn't know who they were, but damn, if the writer for Scooby-Doo and Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed worked on it, you know I'm on board. But I had no expectations going in other than maybe some cursory knowledge that they're a team of sorts in the wide Marvel Comics universe. Which makes it all the more important that the writing was very character-driven. Most of us had no attachment to these characters. Honestly, stories should be character-driven no matter what, but here, there's an increased emphasis. The unlikely group bickered and had their own agendas, but by the end, they realized that they can accomplish goals better as a unit, which, when written poorly, can be an outright moral statement. But here, it feels earned. They dealt with their problems together, seen each other's bad sides, and when that iconic line is said,
"We are Groot,"
you know that it's sunk in. They know that they have to work together and the true value of teamwork. Once enemies, now turned into friends. It's not a perfect relationship. They fight constantly, even after this. But in and around this friendship bubble are other relationships. Peter and Gamora, Gamora and Nebula, Drax and Mantis. Whether it's romantic, familial, or I really don't know what Drax and Mantis would be, but definitely some third thing. Big emphasis is placed on strengthening the interpersonal bonds between these characters. A standout characteristic of the Guardians of the Galaxy films is the jukebox-style, music-driven storytelling. I'm normally not the biggest fan of including any sort of pop music in movies for the sake of including something recognizable. I'm looking at you, other Chris Pratt-led film, cough, Mario movie, cough. But when properly worked into a film, music of any kind can be a powerful tool to convey emotion. James Gunn is a master of curating playlists, and it really isn't all that difficult or groundbreaking what he's doing. A big reason why his music works is that he ties the specific song really well into the journey of each character, or to set us in a mood that'll bring us closer to a particular state of mind. Looking at Star-Lord himself, Peter Quill, his whole identity is his music. His mother's mixtape is all he had with him, and while he does make plenty of reference to the music within it, as well as other pop culture of the time, the real benefit is seeing the other characters solely adopt it. In Guardians 1, the music almost exclusively plays when Peter features on the sequence. It's his soundtrack. In Guardians Volume 2, it plays for Rocket twice, once when he messes with the Ravagers and again at the end. We'll revisit that end scene soon. In Volume 3, Rocket is shown to be listening to the music himself on his own, and even sings to it. By the end, like I said, spoilers, the new Guardians of the Galaxy team are discussing different artists. It's a legacy passed down from Quill, and now Rocket is fulfilling that role. But speaking of Rocket, I'm kind of surprised they didn't play the Beatles' Rocky Raccoon, considering they had a George Harrison song in Volume 2. But that's not what I want to talk about. If you'd ask me back in 2014 which Marvel character had the most heart, I'd laugh at the possibility that it'd be a CG Raccoon, but here we are. While Rocket's grief has been hinted at, Guardians 3 really contextualizes it.
I didn't ask to be torn apart and put back together over and over and turned into some little monster.
And going back to his previous appearances, it just hits different. Rocket has had a lot of time since the flashback scenes of Volume 3. I wouldn't say he really grew much outside of learning to play well with the other Guardians, but he didn't need to. He was flawed and broken when we first met his character, though he didn't show it. Multiple times we see him vulnerable, and now we know why. Guardians 2 definitely wasn't my favorite Guardians film, but I was hit pretty hard by the scene of the Ravagers holding a funeral for Yondu at the end. On the surface, it feels like a goodbye between Peter and Yondu. The song that plays is literally called Father and Son because Yondu is Peter's father figure. And while that's true, it's also a goodbye for Rocket. One of many goodbyes. The last shot is of Rocket looking up at the fireworks, and this scene has so much more meaning now, about 5 years later. Rocket doesn't always show it, but he confides in the others. Not outright, of course. Peter says as much when he mentions that Rocket wouldn't talk about his past, but he feels at home with a group of friends. So no one told me life was gonna be this way. Couldn't help myself. Friends, not the show, has been the one constant throughout the Guardians films. For Rocket in particular, he lost his friends rather suddenly, all while trying to escape with them, but they were shot down. He couldn't say goodbye. He was a kid, emotional, but still had to run and worry about surviving. Fast forward and he's dealing with a trauma. Despite his own rough personality, it's clear that he has some demons to face. After Yondu dies, he has some regrets about the way he treated him. And the other characters have their own regrets, or at least somewhat related problems to contend with. After Gamora's death and the time travel shenanigans with Thanos bringing her back, Peter's just fucked up, unable to detach the Gamora he knew from the alternate timeline version. Nebula, after being rescued by Captain Marvel in Endgame, has a solemn moment with Rocket, the only one there who knew Gamora and, unbeknownst to her, the only one who knew what she was going through. When Thanos took Gamora to Vormir, she had just recently made up with her and got her sister back.
I don't need to tell you what you want, it's obvious!
You were the one who wanted to win, and I just wanted a sister!
Drax's story is more simple in that his family was killed by Thanos, fueling his rage. Peter, Nebula, or Drax never got their proper goodbyes. In Peter's case, this is reflected in him refusing to take his mother's hand and giving her the proper goodbye. In real life, we put breakups on a high pedestal. It's no fun when you're dating someone and things have to end. But it's interesting that we don't talk about friendships ending. I think a big strength of the Guardians is that they put a lot of emphasis on platonic relationships, before going into what Hollywood has traditionally served up with romantic relationships. Losing friends is a feeling we all know, but for many, they're the baseline support system. When you lose a romantic partner, you go to your friends, but when you lose your friends, if you don't have any more of those or no family to talk to, you're out of luck. We invest all this time into these people that when they're gone, it can sometimes hurt just as much or even more than a romantic breakup. When Rocket loses his friends to the High Evolutionary and his guards, he was all by himself. When you lose friends, we as a society don't place as much emphasis on the emotional toll that takes, so it's even more raw when we see it unfold. It's not as common in media, but we can identify with it easily. But there's one thing that stings more than a simple friendship ending, and that's the lack of a proper goodbye, a proper conclusion to your time with these people. Rocket has hopped from one friend group to the next, from his animal friends of Batch 89 to the Guardians to the Avengers. He has had to watch people die so many times. My guy deserves a break. Rocket never got to show Lila, Teefs, or Floor the sky. Rocket regrets what he says to Yondu during his funeral. Turns out what Yondu says about Rocket earlier in Guardians 2 about being empty ended up being true.
I know you play like you're the meanest and the hardest, but actually you're the most scared of all. Just a little bit of love reminds you how big and empty that hole inside you actually is.
I said shut up!
And while everyone was brought back from the snap, he watched a teenage group disintegrate to dust, someone he had already lost once before. And then at the end of Volume 3, he frees all the other animals, gets revenge on the High Evolutionary, and starts a new Guardians of the Galaxy team. But more importantly, the initial roster of the Guardians go their separate ways, and he finally gets a proper goodbye. It wasn't perfect, but he's already seen the extent of their friendship, as evident by Nebula crying over him, Peter saving him, Mantis being glad he's alright. He finally got an end to a chapter, a much deserved one.
Into the forever and beautiful sky.
Despite the lackluster entries into the MCU recently, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 reminds me how much these characters mean to me. A piece of media that gets you to care about the pain one character goes through shows how powerful storytelling can be. Me personally, I lost some friends not too long ago, the specifics of which aren't important, but as best as I can, I tried to get a goodbye in, no matter how ugly it ended. I wanted to show appreciation for the good times I had. No one mourns a friendship, at least not to the extent that we should. But eventually, we need to move on. Every situation's different, but I personally am not looking towards repairing any particular friendships. The ship has sailed on those. I think it's okay to miss the good times, but I think being able to say your goodbyes, in whatever form that takes, is a step towards moving on. As a whole, the Guardians franchise was good, and the third entry built off of so much of what we loved from the previous films established. In a film with a lot of aliens, it really is a people story. Get out of here, Thor Ragnarok. The first Guardians film began with Peter Quill singing and dancing to Come and Get Your Love. So when Rocket plays it at the end, saying there's something sentimental about it, it shows how full circle it's become. Music brought together the first team of the Guardians, and now this new team already has something in common. Thanks for watching. I want to do more Marvel content on this channel, and more varied videos in general. If you want to see more, please leave a like and a comment, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button.